Shalom, shalom, everybody, man. It's Shalom. What's up with y'all? How y'all doing today? I hope y'all had a good Sabbath. For those that keep it. But we here, man. We here. So we can go ahead and finish up this book. We only got a couple more laws, or what would be the chapters left in the 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene, the Joyce Elford's book. And we are on law 45. So we really only got 3 laws left to go. I was supposed to be here earlier, but I wasn't. So yeah, law 45. Law 45. Let's get to it. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Judgment. Everyone understands the need for change in the abstract, but on the day-to-day level, people are creatures of habit. Too much innovation is traumatic and will lead to revolt. If you are new to a position of power or an outsider trying to build a power base, make a show of respecting the old way of doing things. If change is necessary, make it feel like a gentle improvement on the past. All right. These last couple of ones have been lengthy to me. You know. So I'm not an avid reader, but you got to wait till it's done. I'm not an avid reader, but I'm trying to do. And we're gonna work on it together. Oh yeah. But we about 6 books in. You know, we about 6 books in right now. And out of the 6 books I read, these last couple of chapters are pretty long. Well, this one's not that bad. This one's not that bad. No, this one's not that bad. But from 46, the last couple of them been long. We're gonna push through. Transgression of the law. Sometime in the early 1520s, King Henry VIII of England decided to divorce his wife, Catherine of Aragon, because she had failed to bear him a son, and because he had fallen in love with the young and comely Anne Boleyn. The Pope Clement VII opposed the divorce and threatened the king with excommunication. The king's most powerful minister, Cardinal Wolsey, also saw no need for divorce, and his half-hearted support of the king cost him his position and soon his life. One man in Henry's cabinet, Thomas Cromwell, not only supported him in his desire for a divorce, but had an idea for realizing it: a complete break with the past. He convinced the king that by severing ties with Rome and making himself the head of a newly formed English church, he would divorce Catherine and marry Anne. By 1531, Henry saw this as the only solution to reward Cromwell for his simple but brilliant idea. He elevated this son of a blacksmith to the post of royal counselor. In 1534, Cromwell had been named the king's secretary, and as the power behind the throne had become the most powerful man in England. But from him, the break with Rome went beyond the satisfaction of the king's carnal desires. He envisioned the new Protestant order in England, with the power of the Catholic Church smashed and its vast wealth in the hands of the king and the government. In that same year, he initiated a complete survey of the churches and monasteries of England. And as it turned out, the treasures and monies that the churches had accumulated over the centuries were far more than he had imagined. His spies and agents came back with astonishing figures. To justify his scheme, Cromwell circulated stories about the corruption in the English monasteries, their abuse of power, their exploitation of the people they supposedly served. Having won Parliament's support for breaking up the monasteries, he began to seize their holdings and to put them out of existence one by one. At the same time, he began to impose Protestantism introducing reforms in religious ritual and punishing those who stuck to Catholicism and who now were called heretics. Virtually overnight, England was converted to a new official religion. A terror fell up. Ooh, man, boy. Virtually overnight, England was converted to a new official religion. I wonder how America would feel. That's why they don't want Sharia law here. That's why they don't want it here. I wonder how they would feel though. Overnight, you wake up in the morning. Oh, they burn your church to the ground. A terror fell on the country. Some people had suffered under the Catholic Church, which before the reforms had been immensely powerful. But some Britons had strong ties to Catholicism and to its comforting rituals. They watched in horror as churches were demolished. Images of Madonna and saints were broken in pieces. Stained glass windows were smashed and the church's treasures were confiscated. With monasteries that had secured the poor suddenly gone, the poor now flooded the streets. The growing ranks of the beggar class were further swelled by the former monks. On top of all this, Cromwell levied high taxes to pay for his ecclesiastical reforms. In 1535, powerful revolts in the north of England threatened to topple Henry from his throne. By the following year, he had suppressed the rebellions, but he had also began to see the cost of Cromwell's reforms. The king himself had never wanted to go this far. He had only wanted a divorce. He only wanted a divorce. It was now Cromwell's turn to watch uneasily as the king began slowly to undo his reforms, reinstating Catholic sacraments and other rituals that Cromwell had outlawed. Sensing his fall from grace, in 1540, Cromwell decided to regain Henry's favor with one throw of the dice. He would find the king a new wife, Henry's third wife, Jane Seymour. Jane Seymour had died a few years before, and he had been pinning for a new young queen. It was Cromwell who found him one, Anne of Cleves, a German princess, and most important to Cromwell, a Protestant. On Cromwell's commission, the painter Holbein produced a flattering portrait of Anne. When Henry saw it, he fell in love and agreed to marry her. Cromwell seemed back in favor. Unfortunately, however, Holbein's painting was highly idealized, and when the king finally met the princess, she did not please him in the least. His anger against Cromwell, first for the ill-conceived reforms, now for saddling him with an unattractive and Protestant wife, could no longer be contained. In June of that year, Cromwell was arrested, charged as a Protestant extremist and a heretic, and sent to the Tower. 6 weeks later, before a large and enthusiastic crowd, the public executioner cut off his head. Interpretation. Thomas Cromwell had a simple idea. He would break up the power of wealth of the church and lay the foundation of the Protestantism in England. And he would do this in the mercilessly short time. He knew his speedy reforms would cause pain and resentment, but he thought these feelings would fade in a few years. More important, by identifying himself with change, he would become the leader of the new order, making the king dependent on him. But there was a problem in this strategy. Like a billiard ball hit too hard against the cushion, his reforms had reactions and caroms he did not envision and could not control. Oh, man. The man who initiates strong reforms often becomes a scapegoat for any kind of dissatisfaction. And eventually, the reaction to his reforms may consume him, for change is upsetting to the human animal, even when it is for the good. Because the world is and always has been full of insecurity and threat. Insecurity and threat. We latch onto familiar faces and create habits and rituals to make the world more comfortable. Change can be pleasant and even sometimes desirable in the abstract, but too much of it creates an anxiety that will stir and boil beneath the surface and then eventually erupt. Never underestimate the hidden conservatism of those around you. It is powerful and entrenched. Never let the seductive charm of an idea cloud your reason. Just as you cannot make people see the world your way, you cannot wrench them into the future with painful changes. Never underestimate the hidden conservatism of those around you. It is powerful and entrenched. It is powerful and entrenched. Never let the seductive charm of an idea cloud your reason. Just as you cannot make people see the world your way, you cannot wrench them into the future with painful changes. They will rebel. If reform is necessary, anticipate the reaction against it and find ways to disguise the change and sweeten the poison. Observance of the law. Come on. You want to sit down? Come sit down. All right. Observance of the law. As a young communist in the 1920s, Mao Zedong, what are you doing? Right there. As a young communist in the 1920s, Mao Zedong understood better than any of his colleagues the incredible odds against a communist victory in China. With their small numbers, limited funds, lack of military experience, and small arsenal of weapons, the party had no hope in success unless it won over China's immense peasant population. But who in the world was more conservative, more rooted in tradition than the Chinese peasantry? The oldest civilization. Take your time. Make sure your brother gets some of that water too. You good? All right. The oldest civilization on the planet had a history that would never loosen its power. No matter how violent the revolution, the ideas of Confucius remained as alive in the 1920s as they had been in the 6th century BC, when the philosopher was alive. Despite the oppressions of the current system, would the peasantry even give up the deep-rooted values of the past for the great unknown of communism? The solution, as Mao saw it, involved a simple deception: cloak the revolution in the clothing of the past, making it comforting and legitimate in the people's eyes. One of Mao's favorite books was the very popular medieval Chinese novel, The Water March, which recounts the exploits of the Chinese Robin Hood and his robber band as they struggle against a corrupt and evil monarch. In China, in Mao's time, family ties dominated over any. Excuse me, no more water. One of Mao's favorite books was the very popular medieval Chinese novel, The Water Margin, which recounts the exploits of the Chinese Robin Hood and his robber band as they struggle against a corrupt and evil monarch. In China, in Mao's time, family ties dominated over any other kind. For the Confucius hierarchy of family, an oldest son remained firmly in place. There you go. But the water margin preached a superior value. The fraternal ties of the band of robbers, the nobility of the cause that unifies or that unites people beyond blood. The novel had become emotional. The novel had great emotional renaissance for Chinese people who love to root for the underdog. Time and again, then Mao would present his revolutionary army as an extension of the robber band in the water margin, likening his struggle to the timeless conflict between the oppressed peasantry and an evil emperor. He made the past seem to envelope and legitimize the communist cause. The peasantry could feel comfortable with and even support a group with such roots in the past. Even once the party came to power, Mao continued to associate with the past. He presented himself to the masses not as a Chinese Lenin, but as the modern Chuko Lane, the real life third century strategist who figures prominently in the popular historical novel, The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. What are you doing? What is that? Where you got that from? In your mouth? That's the sausage you was eating. Mm-hmm. 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 You feeling all right? You sure? How you stomach feel? Stomach feel all right? Yes, sir. I'm feeling right. Your stomach feel all right? Right. All right. Yeah. Watch back, son. All right. All right. Blah, blah, blah. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. I see him. Hey, calm down. Hey, don't come up here making all that noise while I'm trying to read. The Romance of the Three Kingdoms. Lang was more than a great general. He was a poet, a philosopher, a figure of stern moral rectitude. Let's see what that means. Rectitude. Rectitude. RECTITUD. Rectitude. 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 Moral uprightness. Integrity. He was a poet, a philosopher, and a figure of stern moral uprightness, stern moral integrity, or stern moral rectitude. So Mao represented himself as a poet warrior like Lang, a man who mixed strategy with philosophy and preached the new ethics. He made himself appear like a hero from the great Chinese tradition of warrior statesmen. Soon, everything in Mao's speeches and writings had a reference to an earlier period in Chinese history. He recalled, for example, the great Emperor Xin, who had unified the country in the 3rd century BC. Xin had burned the works of Confucius, consolidated and completed the building of the Great Wall, and given his name to China. And given his name to China. Like Xin, Mao also had brought the country together and had sought bold reforms against an oppressive past. Xin had traditionally been seen as a violent dictator whose reign was short. The brilliance of Mao's strategy was to turn this around, simultaneously reinterpreting Xin, justifying his rule in the eyes of the present-day Chinese, and using him to justify the violence on of the new order that Mao himself was creating. For whoever that is, it's right here. But for right now, bam, 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 bam. Bam. Xin had traditionally been seen as a violent dictator whose reign was short. The brilliance of Mao's strategy was to turn this around, simultaneously reinterpreting Xin, justifying his rule in the eyes of present-day Chinese, and using him to justify the violence of the new order that Mao himself was creating. After the failed Cultural Revolution of the late 1960s, the powerful struggle emerged in the Communist Party, in which Mao's main foe was Lin Pao, one of a close friends of his. To make clear to the masses the difference between his philosophy and Lin's, Mao once again exploited the past. He cast his opponent as respecting Confucius, a philosopher Lin, in fact, would constantly quote, and Confucius signified the signified the conservatism of the past. Mao associated himself, on the other hand, with the ancient philosophical movement known as legalism, exemplified by the writings of Han Feishu. The legalists disdained Confucius' ethics. They believed in the need for violence to create a new world. They worshipped power. To give himself weight in the struggle, Mao unleashed a nationwide propaganda campaign against Confucius, using the issues of Confucianism versus legalism to whip the young into a kind of frenzied revolt against the older generation. This grand context enveloped the rather banal power struggle, and Mao once again won over the masses and triumphed over his enemies. Interpretation. New people had a more profound attachment to the past than the Chinese. In the face of this enormous obstacle to reform, Mao's strategy was simple. Instead of struggling against the past, he turned to his advantage, associating his radical communists with the romantic figuring of Chinese history, weaving the history of the War of the Third Kingdoms into the struggle between the United States, the Soviet Union, and China. He cast himself as Shuko Lang, as the emperors had. He welcomed the cult-like admiration of the masses, understanding that the Chinese could not function without some kind of father figure to admire. Right. Oh shit, this is the wrong color. Orange is for stuff that says definitions. As the emperor himself, as the emperors had, He welcomed the cult-like adoration of the masses, understanding that the Chinese could not function without some kind of father figure to admire. And after he made a terrible blunder with a great leap forward, trying to force moderation on the country and failing miserably, he never repeated his mistake. From then on, radical change had to be cloaked in the comfortable clothes of the past. The lesson is simple. The past is powerful. What? And after he made a terrible blunder with the great leap forward, trying to force moderation on the country and failing miserably, he never repeated his mistake. From then on, radical change had to be cloaked in the comfortable clothes of the past. The lesson is simple. The past is powerful. What has happened before seems greater. Habit and history give any act weight. Use this to your advantage. When you destroy the familiar, you create a void or a vacuum. People fear the chaos. When we destroy the familiar, you create a void or vacuum. People fear the chaos that will flood in to fill it. You must avoid stirring up such fears at all costs. Borrow the weight and legitimacy from the past, however remote, to create a comforting and familiar presence. This will give your actions romantic associations. Add to your presence and cloak the nature of the changes you are attempting. It must be considered that there is nothing more difficult to carry out, nor more doubtful of success, nor more dangerous to handle, that to initiate a new order of things. Niccolo Machiavelli, 1469 to 1527. Keys to power. Human psychology contains many dualities, one of them being that even while people understand the need for change, knowing how important it is for institutions and individuals to be occasionally renewed, they are also irritated and upset by changes that affect them personally. They know that change is necessary and that novelty provides relief from boredom, but deep inside they cling to the past. Change in the abstract or superficial change they desire, but a change that upsets core habits and routines is deeply disturbing to them. Oh, that's good. No revolution has gone without a powerful later reaction against it. For in the long run, the void it creates proves too unsettling to the human animal, who unconsciously associates such void with death and chaos. The opportunity for change and renewal seduces people to the side of the revolution, but once their enthusiasm fades, which it will, they are left with a certain emptiness. Yearning for the past, they create an opening for it to creep back in. For Machiavelli, the prophet who preaches and brings change can only survive by taking up arms. When the masses inevitably yearn for the past, he must be ready to use force. But the armed prophet cannot last long unless he quickly creates a new set of values and rituals to replace the old ones and to soothe the anxieties of those who dread change. It is far easier and less bloody to play a kind of con game. Preach change as much as you like, and even enact your reform, but give them the comforting appearance of older events and traditions. Reigning from 8 AD to 23 AD, the Chinese emperor Wang Mang emerged from a period of great historical turbulence in which the people yearned for order, and order represented for them by Confucius. Some 200 years earlier, however, Emperor Xin had ordered the writings of Confucius burned, And for years later, word has spread that certain texts had miraculously survived, hidden under the scholar's house. These texts may not have been genuine, but they gave Wang his opportunity. He first confiscated them, then had his scribes insert passages into them that seemed to support the changes he had been imposing on the country. When he realized the text, when he released the text, it seemed that Confucius sanctioned Wang's reforms, and the people felt comforted and accepted them more easily. Understand, the fact that the past is dead and buried gives you freedom to reinterpret it. That sounds familiar. Understand. The fact that the past is dead and buried gives you buried up buried. Bird gives the freedom to reinterpret it. To support your cause, tinker with the facts. The past is a text in which you can safely insert your own lines. A simple gesture like using an old title or keeping the same number for the group will tie you to the past and support you with the authority of history. As Machiavelli himself observed, the Romans used this device when they transformed their monarchy into a republic. They may have installed two consuls in place of the king, but since the king had been served by 12 lictors, they retained the same number to serve under the councils. The king had personally performed an annual sacrifice and a great spectacle that stirred the public. The republic retained this practice. Only transferring it to a special chief of the ceremony, whom they called the king of the sacrifice. These are similar gestures satisfied the people. These and similar gestures satisfied the people and kept them from clamoring for the monarchy's return. Musketeer agitator. Oh, what up? You should get on here and say shalom instead of where my brother at. I mean, instead of asking where the Bible at. Say shalom first. Say shalom first, agitator. Say shalom first. But anyway, back to the 40 laws of Paul. Just made me think about you. I hope you and your family are doing well up there in Canada. These and similar gestures satisfied the people and kept them from clamoring for the monarchy's return. Another strategy to disguise change is to make a loud and public display of support for the values of the past. Seem to be a zealot for tradition. And if you will notice how unconventional you really are. Renaissance Florence had a centuries-old republic and was suspicious of anyone who flaunted its traditions or flouted. Flouted. F-L-O-U-T-E-D, flouted. Flout. I'm gonna go with flout. Flouted its traditions. Flout, to treat with contempt, to mock. Flout. Renaissance, Renaissance Florence had a century-old republic and was suspicious of anyone who would treat its traditions with contempt or mock its traditions or flouted its traditions. Cosimo de Medici made a show of enthusiastic support for the Republic, while in reality he worked to bring the city under the control of his wealthy family. In form, the Medicis retained the appearance of a republic. In substance, they rendered it powerless. They quietly enacted a radical change while appearing to safeguard tradition. Science claims a search for truth, but what would seem to protect it from conservatism and the irrationality of habit. It is a culture of innovation. Yet when Charles Darwin published his ideas of evolution, he faced fiercer opposition from his fellow scientists than from religious authorities. His theories challenged too many fixed ideas. Jonas Salk ran into the same wall with his radical innovations in immunology, as did Max Planck with his revolutionizing of physics. Planck later wrote the scientific opposition he faced. A new scientific truth does not triumph by convincing its opponents and making them see the light, but rather because its opponents eventually die and a new generation grows up that is familiar with it. The answer to the innate conservatism is to play the courtier's game. Galileo did this at the beginning of his scientific career. He later became more confrontational and paid for it. So pay lip service to tradition. Identify the elements in your revolution that can be made to seem to build on the past. Say the right things. Make a show of conformity, and meanwhile, let your theories do the radical work. Move on. Play with appearances and respect past protocol. This is true in every arena, science being no exception. Finally, powerful people pay attention to the zeitgeist. If their reform is too far ahead of its time, few will understand it, and it will stir up anxiety and be hopelessly misinterpreted. The changes you make must seem less innovative than they are. England did eventually become a Protestant nation, as Cromwell wished, but it took over a century of gradual evolution. Watch the zeitgeist. I wonder if that has a definition in here. The zeitgeist. Watch the zeitgeist. Zeitgeist. No, it's not here. Watch the zeitgeist. If you work in a tumultuous time, there is power to be gained by preaching a return to the past, to comfort, tradition, and ritual. If you work in a tumultuous time, there is power to be gained by preaching a return to the past. Yes, sir. To the past. In the past. Yes, sir. There is power to be gained by preaching a return to the past, to comfort, traditions, and ritual. During a period of stagnation, on the other hand, play the card of reform and revolution. But beware of what you stir up. Those who finish, leave my stuff alone. Those who finish a revolution are rarely those who started. You will not succeed at this dangerous game unless you are willing to forestall the inevitable reaction against it by playing with appearances and building on the past. On the past. Authority. He who desires or attempts to reform the government of the state and wishes to have it accepted must at least retain the semblance of the old forms, so that it may seem to the people that there has been no change in the institutions, even though in fact they are entirely different from the old ones. For the great majority of mankind are satisfied with appearances, and as though they are as though they are realities. Niccolo Machiavelli, 1469 to 1527. Image, the cat, creature of habit. It loves the warmth of the familiar. Upset its routines, disrupt its space, and it will grow unmanageable and psychotic, placated by supporting its rituals. If change is necessary, deceive the cat by keeping the smell of the past alive. Place objects familiar to it in strategic locations. Reversal. The past is a corpse to be used as you see fit. If what happened in the recent past was painful and harsh, it is self-destructive to associate yourself with it. When Napoleon came to power, the French Revolution was fresh in everyone's minds. If the court that he established had borne any resemblance to the lavish court of Louis XVI, and Marie Antoinette, his courtiers would have spent all their time worrying about their own necks. Instead, Napoleon established a court remarkable for its sobriety and lack of ostentation, my bad, and lack of ostentation. Let's look it up, DJ. Let's look up ostentation. Ostentation. Lack of ostentation. Say it again. Ostentation. Ostentation. Good job. Lack of ostentation. Now we got to look and see what it means. Yeah, what does it mean? What does ostentation mean? Whatever word we don't know, we have to look it up to see what it means. Ostentation. Unnecessary show or display of wealth. Yes. Oh man. Man, hey, some went down the wrong pipe. No, sir, I don't need that. Napoleon established a court remarkable for its sobriety and lack of unnecessary show of display of wealth or lack of ostentation. It was the court of a man who valued work and military virtues. This new form seemed appropriate and reassuring. In other words, pay attention to the times, but understand, if you make a bold change from the past, you must avoid at all costs the appearance of the void or vacuum, or you will create terror. Even an ugly recent history will seem preferable to the empty space. Fill that space immediately with new rituals and forms, soothing and growing familiar. These will secure your position among the masses. Finally, the arts, fashion, and technological would seem to be areas in which power would come from creating a radical rupture with the past. And it has many dangers. In the past, and appearing cutting edge. Indeed, such a strategy can bring great power, but it has many dangers. It is inevitable that your innovations would be outdone by someone else. You have little control. Someone younger and fresher moves in a sudden new direction, making your bold innovation of yesterday seem tiresome. Who? Tiresome and tame today. You are forever playing catch up. Your power is tenuous and short-lived. You want a power built on something more solid, using the past, tinkering with tradition, playing with convention to subvert it will give your creation something more than a momentary appeal. Periods of dizzying change disguise the fact that a yearning for the past will inevitably creep back in. In the end, using the past for your own purpose will bring you more power than trying to cut it out completely. A futile and self-destructive endeavor. Whew. That was Law 45. Law 45. Preach the need for change, but never reform too much at once. Everyone understands the need for change in the abstract, but on the day-to-day level, people are creatures of habit. Too much innovation is traumatic and will lead to revolt. If you are new to a position of power or an outsider trying to build a power base, make a show of respecting the old way of doing things. If change is necessary, make it feel like a gentle improvement on the past. Next time we'll come back with Law 46. Law 46. I actually kind of want to read this tonight, but I might come back later on, depending on how late I'm up, man. So we can hurry up and get done with the book, man. We only got Law 46, Law 47, and Law 48 left, so that's 3 laws we got left, and we'll be finished with the 48 laws of power by Robert Greene, Joyce Elford's book, and then we could be on to the next one. We'll be on to the next book. But Law 46 will be never appear too perfect. Judgment. Appearing better than others is always dangerous, but most dangerous of all is to appear to have no faults or weaknesses. Envy creates silent enemies. It is smart to occasionally display defects and admit to harmless vices. In order to deflect envy and appear more human and approachable, envy creates silent enemies. It's smart to occasionally display defects and admit to harmless vices in order to deflect envy and appear more human and approachable. Only gods and the dead can seem perfect with impunity. So that'll be next time. That'll be the next time, Law 46. When we come back, we'll read Law 46. And after Law 46, we're going to pick up with Dr. Sherazad Ali's book, The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man. That'll be the next one. The next one on the list to read. But for YouTube, you're going to get both of them. Since I haven't read the Black Man's Guide to Understanding the Black Woman on YouTube, I'll reread that one for YouTube, but this one will be on both YouTube and Facebook. The Black Woman's Guide to Understanding the Black Man by Dr. Sherazad Ali. That's going to be the next one on the list. So, till next time. YouTube, man. Till next time, man. Get with me. Like the thing, dislike it. If you have any books that you think we can learn from, gain little nuggets from, put it in the comments. Put it in the comments. Anybody, Facebook, you got any books that you think would be good to read? I got some already that gonna be in the once I get a hold of them. I got a couple more coming. On the way. Hey, chill out. I got a couple of more coming. I'm waiting on Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I also want to read The Pale White Horse, among others. I got the Book of Jasher. We're gonna read that one too, along with other books. Shit. And we'll go through the Bible for sure. But that's what it is, man. Shalom. Shalom to everybody. On YouTube, that was the 48 Laws of Power, Law 45. We'll come back with Law 46. Shalom, shalom.